So first of all, I'd like to thank Mary and the team for having me here. I see a lot of places and names that I'm very familiar with, being a Northern Peninsula kid myself and growing up in Cowhead. So it's nice to be able to see and be able to kind of give back some of the education that I've received to everyone here, and hopefully provide you guys with some knowledge on to be able to create an online store in today's world where it's becoming even more and more important to become engage with creating a website to sell online, as it's more difficult for us to kind of move around. So just a little quick background on myself. Just one sec here. I own Newfound Marketing. It's a digital marketing agency now that I founded back in 2012. We currently help companies with their social media strategy, their inbound marketing, their SEO, their digital media management, web design and development, which includes building online stores. I've been working in the space now for over 18 years, which seems really, really long for me, in my opinion, but it's quite a while. And right now, we currently have around, as of last Monday, we currently have 12 employees who have been working really hard over the course of the pandemic, as this industry itself has become really busy, with many people and many businesses looking to improve their online presence. So just to kind of run through today in terms of what the agenda is. First of all, if you're considering an online store or you want to sell online, I want to kind of give you a few stats, not to go too overboard in terms of why it's important. And the biggest part of today's session is really about providing you with information in terms of the things that you would want to consider before you make the decision to go and sell your products online through an e-commerce platform. So there's some things and some work that, whether you're a solopreneur or a small business or a medium-sized business, that you should consider and perhaps do some research. So we'll run through some of those, and then we'll kind of get into the platforms that are available out there. There's quite a number of them, and we'll focus on two. And then once the platform is chosen, I'll also run through just a few things that, if you are going to begin the journey, or maybe update the journey of creating an online store, or selling your products online, just some things that you can do to make your store successful, and getting a lot of this work before you start, and thinking about those things before you start is super important. And once you've got the store up and online and you've made yourself, put the steps in to be successful, I'll I'll finish the presentation with several ways that, if once you get your store online, or if you have an online store, that you can market your store to reach a bigger audience in the online space. And then once we finish kind of everything that's here on the agenda, what I'd love to be able to do is to hear from you and to get your feedback, any questions that you may have on today's session, but also, as Mary had mentioned earlier, in terms of what some future sessions could be. And I would love to be able to get some of the feedback from you in terms of what you would see as being important. Are there topics or areas that you would like to go more in depth with, probably over the next couple of months? So if you're creating an online store, one thing that's happened, especially since the pandemic, and this is just in terms of what happened when the pandemic began, is that the traffic that people who have an online store were seeing was more like the Black Friday, which we're all very familiar with, and the Cyber Mondays. But when the pandemic hit, and then all of a sudden we began to go on lockdowns, what was happening for people who currently had an online store is that they were seeing this frequency of traffic to their website that matched Black Friday levels every single day. So, there's a big change that everybody was shopping from home, making changes, and also the categories of things that people were buying were also changing as well. So, as I mentioned a couple of seconds ago, the categories and the way we shopped has changed immensely. So, prior to the pandemic, you kind of see, how people were shopping, going to stores and buying things in person. And then you kind of see some categories that have completely changed now with people going online. One of the biggest, obviously, is retail. And you see a shift there that's down in person by 34%, and online it's up by 94%. And some of the bigger categories that were really driven by the changes in the pandemic were furniture and home. So obviously, I think within that category itself was the number of people who had to kind of change the way they were doing work, not working in perhaps in an office environment, and then moving and making a home office environment. So online sales for desk, chairs, computer monitors, and technology increased by a lot. And then we also saw the same with regards to sports and fitness, which is kind of there. We saw 154% because we couldn't go to the gym, we couldn't do our traditional workouts. So people were bringing what would normally be places of work or fitness that we would go to, and now they're bringing that to their home. Food and beverage was also probably one of the biggest changes. In bigger centers, we would see a change where we would not be able to go to to our supermarkets. So the options were created for online, and you'd order your food online, which is very different. And many organizations had to make a change for that. I think there are several here that adapted really quickly. Coleman's comes to mind here locally in terms of being able to have a system in place where you could order online and then you could go ahead and then pick it up. What we also saw then was, building a garden supply as we kind of moved into the warmer season as well, also began to make a change. With regards to how people who run most companies, face the pandemic. So a survey of about 250 chief marketing officers, in some cases, many businesses would maybe tighten their belts and tighten their spending, but in this particular case, for the 250 CMOs, they actually wanted to reinvest and invest more in their advertising. They wanted to increase more of their content marketing, and that would mean just writing more blog posts, creating more social posts, creating more videos, and they also wanted to focus on the organic growth, and that organic growth would be more traffic coming from search engines to their website, and then also an increase in spend for social media as more and more people were kind of, we were at home spending more time on our devices. So organizations wanted to make sure that they were, getting people's attention. So instead of decreasing the amount of money they were spending in marketing, they were actually increasing the amount of money that they were spending in marketing. So I just wanted to kind of share with you like those stats in terms of how important that creating an online store is for today during the pandemic, and also like as we begin to hopefully see the horizon of moving out of the pandemic and getting back to what we would call our normal life pre-pandemic times, is that some of the changes that we've now adopted online will stay. And I think to compete in today's world and the future in terms of where we're going, if you have a physical product that you are selling, so whether you are selling to the Northern Peninsula, the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, or international, it is important to have an online store set up so people can find your business and they can buy from you. So before you start, I just wanted to kind of outline a couple of things that would be important for you to consider. So whether you're a solopreneur or a small to mid-sized company that maybe has 2 to 5 or 10 or 15 employees, some of the considerations that you'll want to think about before you go down this venture is, what resources and skill sets do you currently have in-house? So if it's from a solopreneur perspective, if you're doing all of the work with regards to maybe creating the product, sourcing the product, but then also doing the marketing and get everything ready. How much time and resource and skill do you have? What training do you need? And within that as well, what additional resources and skill sets do you need? And one of the things that's important with this question right here that comes up quite a bit, more so for solopreneurs and really small businesses who may be getting off the ground, you need to consider the time and energy and investment that it's going to take to get your site online, and making the decision on whether or not you want to outsource to get somebody else to create the store for you, or if you want to take that responsibility on within your team to do it. There's certainly pros and cons to each. One of the pros of outsourcing that is that if you find a freelancer or a company who can build a store for you, they have the experience and the knowledge to get your store in place much faster. So that will allow you to be able to spend more time and energy focusing on your business and not having to, spend that time and energy on creating an online store yourself. That being said, if resources are limited financially and time, and with regards to time, then you can do it for yourself, but also keep in mind while you're doing that it may take a little bit longer as you're learning these new skills to get your site up and running and in place. Once you've made the decision in terms of who's going to build your store, like anything, once it's built, it doesn't, the work doesn't stop there. It's who's going to maintain your store. So with regards to inventory, so if you're getting new inventory or you're creating new inventory on a daily or weekly basis, who's going to put that information or the inventory into your website? Or if you have a physical location and you're selling and you have inventory, you need to make sure that if you're selling something and the inventory is being sold physically, that inventory is also going to be updated online as well, so people aren't buying a product online but you've ran out of inventory. So that's a very strong consideration that you'll want to have once you kind of begin to build your store. A second part of that as well, for anyone who has a business, customer service is super important. It's important in many regards, whether, if you've been mostly doing in-person business, but from an online perspective, it's probably even more important because it doesn't take very much today for consumers to have a negative impact on your business and maybe put in a couple of complaints. So it's, as you're building your store, you need to think about who's going to be responsible for customer service, who's going to answer the phone, who's going to answer emails. What if there's fulfillment issues? So, someone purchases your product and then you send it to Canada Post, and Canada Post is creating delays. Like, who does that? And within the customer service piece of it, you need to consider, is there education and training? If this is a new venture for you, how do you handle online customer service? So, your store, once it's up and running, it's going to be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So you're going to get an email that may come in at 1 a.m. or a Facebook message that comes in at 9:30 at night or 6 a.m. in the morning. So, how do you handle that? Do you only do customer service at a certain time of day? Or do you want to respond to a customer 24 hours a day? So a few considerations, and once you begin thinking about creating your store, that you'll want to consider. So once you've kind of go through the self-assessment and get answers to the questions above, and you've decided now that you're going to continue with the journey of creating your store, the biggest decision that you'll probably have to make next is what platform is right for you. And, at the moment, this is just a small sample of the platforms that are available for you to be able to create an online store. Most popular right now is probably Shopify. And after Shopify, for a beginner store or a medium-sized store, Shopify is definitely probably the number one choice that we recommend. And as your store gets bigger, you've got sites out there like BigCommerce. And if you don't want to do Shopify, and you have a WordPress site, for example, then you may want to choose a product like WooCommerce. So things that you'll want to look for when you're creating your store, before you create your store and your evaluation, is is it easy for you to set up your store? What kind of tutorials are available for you? And most organizations in the list that I gave you earlier are fantastic at providing you customer service, which we talked about to be super important, but also tutorials, whether it's videos or classes to be able to set up your store. You also want to be able to, from a navigation perspective. So you need to think about, is it for your store? is it easy for consumers to be able to navigate and to be able to do business with you? So that's something to consider. Integrations as well. So what I mean by that is depending on the products that you have, there may be different integrations that you have. So if it's something where you've got different weights of products, then you may have a weight calculator that you need to add in. And so what does that look like for the stores? Or if you have a point of sale system today that you use for your in-person store, and then you want to do an online store, is there a way to be able to integrate both of those together so your inventory matches up, your accounting matches up as well? So those are a couple of considerations when you're looking for your online store to have in place. Um, Next is to be SEO friendly. So that's for search engine optimization. So basically that's anyone who's doing a search, whether it's mostly through Google or potentially through Bing, the setup or the platform that you choose, does it make it easy for you to be able to make sure that you can be set up successfully for SEO? Most platforms today does make it very easy for you to be able to do. And then next, what's super important is the mobile friendly aspect of it. So um, most people today are shopping not necessarily on a laptop or on your typical computer, but are actually making purchases on their phone, and they're making purchases from anywhere. So what's going to be super important is that when you create your online store, is that you need to be thinking about the smartphone capability and what could your store begin to look like when it's and how mobile friendly it's going to be. The next consideration that you'll want to have, especially if you're going to go down the path of creating the store yourself, is to get a really good idea of what kind of tech support that the platform that you're going to work with that they provide, because you may have a lot of questions that, especially with the setting up of your store and perhaps the maintenance of your store, and you want to work with a company that has a really good tech support, who's going to be there 24 hours a day potentially, just in case, if your site goes down on, let's say on a Friday evening and you've got a sale coming up for the weekend, you want to make sure that you're going to work with a platform that has good tech support, who's going to help you get through that and get you back to the way that you want to have it. Another consideration as well is customer payment options. So obviously the ability to pay with a Visa or MasterCard is going to be super important. People may want to pay with PayPal. So is that an option that you can include? Apple Pay is another option that a lot of people look for. Google Pay as well. So it's super important that you think about all the payment options that are available to you. And then lastly, once you've kind of went through the rest of the criteria, it's always going to come down to price. If you want all the bells and whistles, then those things may cost you a little more. So you need to find a happy medium between the features that you want to include on your store, the options that are available to you, and then also the price of what that's going to cost you. And with most platforms, it's going to cost you it's going to be a monthly cost just to be able to use their platform. So you need to look at what does that budget look like, and then kind of make your decision from there. So for the purpose of today's presentation, we're going to only kind of go through the two main platforms that most people would use, and that's WooCommerce and Shopify, and just kind of go through a couple of differences in terms of what you may choose and you consider when you're kind of picking between these two platforms and the pros and cons of each. So the very first thing that you'll want to consider if you're starting a store, or whether you have a website or not, is the web hosting. So any website that you have needs to have a web host. So if you're going with Shopify, your web hosting is included within your monthly cost, and that monthly cost will typically start around $29 a month. And there's a number of pros to that. Is the fact that you don't have to connect your site to a hosting company. You're not tied into or to have a separate bill that's the Shopify doesn't have to talk to your hosting. You can kind of set that up separately, and it's great. It's really secure. Shopify have really good servers from there. But if you have a WordPress site and you want to install an online store, then you would use WooCommerce. And with WooCommerce, then you do need to make a decision in terms of the hosting that you will have. And while the monthly cost can be cheaper, there's a number of implications to that. Typically, if you've got If you've got cheaper hosting, it means your site's going to be potentially a little slower. And it could be, and if that's the case, and most users, when you're going to make a purchase, site speed is super important. And with that, you need to make sure that if you choose a cheaper hosting that can be as low as $3 a month, you're kind of giving away the speed, what somebody could be looking for to make a purchase. Reporting would be important as well, depending on the volume of sales that you'll have. With Shopify, there is an option where they will tell you, how your sales are doing, what's working, what's not working. It comes in about $79 per month. And with WooCommerce, they're built in and they're free, and you can add and kind of add in the reports that you want to add in at your own time. Or again, if you outsource, you can have someone to do that. The next thing is flexibility. So Shopify itself is, it's flexible, but if you really want to create a very custom store, the look and feel or the experience for a user, then you can probably lean more towards WooCommerce. For most people, if you're starting your first online store, Shopify will probably have what you need. Because there's a lot of options there, a lot of templates that you can use. You're not recreating the wheel every single time. And one of the pros of that kind of goes to the consumer as well. So when you actually have your store completed, is that with more and more companies creating their stores with Shopify, users themselves are getting really familiar with the Shopify platform, what websites, what stores look like on Shopify, how to navigate. So if you have your store built on Shopify, the person who comes to purchase is probably familiar with the navigation and be able to make the purchase a little bit easier. The next would be design. So as I mentioned, Shopify, they have themes. So once you decide to go with Shopify, for example, you can buy a theme. So this is something that's been created in advance by someone else, and then you go and you make it your own. Typically costs about $150, but it does make the process and the speed of which that you can build your site a little bit faster. With WooCommerce, there are thousands upon thousands of themes, and you can the price ranges again from $20 to $100. The next piece that you'll want to consider is the ease of use. And again, if you're probably doing this yourself, or maybe it's you're going to get a staff member to do it, the good thing with a platform like Shopify is that has many tutorials. It's a plug and play system. It's very easy to set up. The time it takes to set up can be faster. But if you do want to have something that is a little more customized, then WooCommerce may be something more for you. It takes a little bit more time to get the initial piece set up, but once you have it in place, then it's quite easy to be able to use. And then cost, as we mentioned earlier as well, cost super important. Here's the three plans that Shopify will provide will be $30 a month, $79 a month, and $300 a month. Again, when your considerations that you'll have there is that if you go with WooCommerce, you do need to pay for hosting outside of your e-commerce costs that will be separate. So the $29 a month usually it's a pretty good price. With WooCommerce, the prices can range. So if you have a beginner store, it may not cost you very much. The hosting can be cheaper. You can find a theme that's not very cheap, or that's not very expensive, sorry, and that will allow you then to be able to get started. But then one of the things that I find often separates, say, a Shopify versus a WooCommerce is the plugins. So plugins for Shopify, typically there's an additional cost that comes with each. So if you want to be able to give gift cards, for example, or even shipping, if you want to provide shipping and people can kind of calculate their own shipping costs, there's typically plugins and extensions that go with that. One thing with WooCommerce is that some of the things that you would take for granted with Shopify, you need to go and make additional purchases on WooCommerce. And we often find that by the more plugins and extensions that you would include in a tool, or if you wanted a WordPress WooCommerce site, the more opportunities for things to break and more opportunities for your store itself to break. But depending on the complexity of the store that you want to create, WooCommerce can still be a good option for you. When it comes to support, Shopify will have its own support. So you'll be able to call up Shopify and they'll be able to assist you. When it comes to WooCommerce, it's the story is a little different. So there's no, there is a WooCommerce support, but typically if you have a challenge or an issue, you may have to work with your web design company, or you may have to work with a couple, 2 or 3 different providers. So your payment gateway, your merchant account, to make sure that all the things that connect together, and that can be quite cumbersome, especially if you're in a crunch on a, say, let's again, on a Friday evening, you've got a sale that's starting tomorrow for on Saturday, then those are things to consider. Other things to consider once you've kind of went through everything and you kind of decide to say between a WooCommerce, Shopify, BigCommerce, and those things are the payment methods. So we talked about those. If you've got an in-person store at the moment, you probably have a point of sale system. So you probably have an option to take credit cards, setting up PayPal so people can pay that way, and the option to pay with Apple Pay and Google Pay, which is becoming increasingly more popular for people to be able to go make a purchase. And one of the benefits to that, if you do have the option for an Apple Pay or a Google Pay, is from a customer experience perspective, it makes the ability to do the checkout to be much easier, which means for you, when people get that product in their carts, you making that transaction and that sale can happen a lot faster if you've got the option on your website to pay with Apple or Google Pay. Other things you'll have to consider is, who's going to do your shipping. So someone buys a product from you, and depending on where you are, who's going to provide the shipping. Is it going to be Canada Post, UPS, DHL, as a couple of examples? And each of those companies will have their own pricing and they'll have their own policies, and you need to make sure in terms of where it's going, who's going to be there. And potentially the next biggest thing for you to consider is who pays for shipping. If you, I'm sure most people have, done shopping online, and in many cases, the shipping for many stores are included. But depending on the size of your business, shipping a product at $15, $20, $30 for a product may not help you make any additional money. So you need to consider, who pays for the shipping and if people are okay with that. And then also your store, it's going to be, because people can't return typically as they would from an in-person perspective, what happens with returns? So as a consumer, if I make a purchase from you and I pay for the shipping, and then I get the product and I don't like the product and I need to do a return, do I pay for the shipping a second time, or is that a cost that you incur? And then what happens if it's a wrong size, for example, or I need to send a second product back? What happens to shipping? Because that's a pretty big important option. You'll have consumers who may want to exchange an item for a size, and all of a sudden you could lose a lot of money on the shipping. So these are all things that you should consider before you make the decision in terms of setting up your online store. And then lastly, the hardware. So as I mentioned earlier, as we kind of hopefully get back to normal times and the pandemic goes away and people can shop in store again, you want to think about the hardware, your point of sale system. So if you have an existing one and it's not something that will cooperate online with Shopify or WooCommerce, what would you look for? Is there an option for you if you went with Shopify, for example? Would you switch to their online point of sale system? So they do have tools and a point of sale system that you can purchase, or if you have an iPad or a phone, you can set that up so people can make purchases through those devices. So those are all the considerations that you should have in place before you go ahead and actually make the decision to have an online store. So it sounds like a lot, and yes, there's a number of things to consider, but before you go down the path, you should really, make a plan in terms of, what does it really cost me to have an online store, and all the additional work that's going to come along with it. So now that you've made the decision, you're going to have your online store, you've went through all the choices, things that you'll want to consider as you're creating your store to be successful will look like this. So the very first thing is going to be creating winning product descriptions. So you want to make sure that when someone finds your store or you have a sale, that you're, writing for your audience, right? So you want to who your target audience is, depending on the product that you have. Is there a certain benefit or feature that you have that is better than the competition, and how do you highlight that? How do you make that really important for the end user? You also want to make sure that you don't want that it's, depending on your product, if it's a technical product, for example, you don't want to overcomplicate it. You want to keep it very easy, so using natural language is super important. But then also tying in words that sell, to make it easy for people to be able to go and hopefully convert them to being a looker and not sure, or maybe adding something to the cart, but you want to get them to the end point where they're adding to the cart and then also going to checkout. And then also you want to make it easy to scan. So make sure that, product photography will be super important. So, again, examples of having good product images, so good lighting. So things when you're going to add your products, especially if it's your own products and not something that you're getting from a supplier or you're getting from someone else, is to make sure that you've got really good quality images. The images on your store, if it's a poor image, or can really make the difference between somebody wanting to make a purchase or not make a purchase. If you look at the example that's here, there is, this is a very plain. It's a very plain example. The background is not very loud. It really makes it's a focus on the product itself, and the ability to be able to zoom in as well is super important. So you want to think about that. And with that, if you're going to do the photos yourself, for example, you want to make sure that you've got bigger pictures to be able to add, so people can zoom in and see the products. One thing that's quite popular now as well, depending on what you're selling, will be a 360-degree option. So that's basically depending on the product, people want to be able to see what it looks like. Same if you're at a store. Let's say if you had a shoe, for example, and you put the shoe in your hand and you kind of rotate it, so you want to look on the top, on the side, on the bottom. So you want to make sure that you have those options when you're creating or adding products to your store. Again, very simple backgrounds. Don't make it loud. Keeping it white would probably be very easy for most stores to make sure that you've got it from there. What's also important with images as well is to make sure that you're labeling your images. So if it's, in this particular case, with regards to the t-shirt, you want to make sure that you label your images. So, white t-shirt, black t-shirt, blue t-shirt, indigo t-shirt, royal blue, taupe, yellow, for example. And that serves two purposes. The second one purpose is it makes it easier to be able to manage it on your store itself. And the second is that if someone is doing a search on Google, especially in the, people are buying a product, they will sometimes not go and necessarily purchase it from you from just going to Google, but they may go to Google Images, and that's where they find the product. So if you label your product correctly, you'll have a better chance of showing up higher. Your images will show up higher, and a better chance of getting more people to come to your store and to make a purchase. So once you've got your product descriptions nailed and you've got really good images, what can really make or break an online store is the email marketing, and a lot of work will have to go on here, before launch, post launch, or sort of during launch and post launch. It's something that you'll probably always want to be testing. So things that you'll want to consider will be the transactional emails, for example. So, when I make a purchase, what does that purchase look like? What is the email that I receive as a purchase? What kind of information is in there? Is there contact info? Do you leave all the information for your social media networks for people to be able to go and find you as well? So there's an example over on the side. The post purchase, so that fulfillment piece, for example. So, once I've made a purchase, the next thing that I want to know is, who's going to deliver it? What's the shipping number? How can I track it? Because I want to know, not once I've made the purchase, where is it and how long is it going to take? So you want to make sure you've got that process down as well, and knowing when that's going to happen and when the purchase and when that process is completed. And so those are transactional pieces. And then once you have your store, one of the good things about having an online store, same as having an in-person store, is the loyalty aspect of it. So it's having the people who shop with you for the first time, and being able to get them to come back a second time or a third time. And with that, then you'll want to create your sales your sales emails. This time of year, for example, what you will typically see in a lot of retailers will be an inventory clearance, any products that they were not able to sell during the holiday period. As you prepare for new seasons and new products, then you'll see a lot of emails now where people doing inventory clearouts or inventory blowouts and offering pretty good discounts. So, will you need that? If you're creating your own products, for example, and you create a new product, what does that look like? How do you let people know about the new product that you have? And then beyond that, there's partnerships. I think even in the group of participants that we have here today, for example, there's probably several partnerships that I could see where people can work together and potentially cross sell products from one store to another. So what does that email look like? And then also looking at the newsletter component of just keeping people in general. So every email that you send is not necessarily going out as a promotion, but also keeping up to date in terms of what's happening with the company. So what does that look like? Another piece that'll be really important are these two pieces right here can really getting these right can really help you in terms of the amount of revenue that you can generate. So the first is the abandoned cart email. And with that, so that's when a user comes to your store, they find a product they like, they add the product to the cart, but they don't check out. So the goal there is to, what's a series of emails that you can get for people to make sure that, you send out an email a second time or a third time, so they come back and they complete their order. And in some cases, maybe they were, thinking about ordering something during the day, and then something else caught their attention and then they didn't do it. And then, maybe your abandoned cart emails will come back later and you can kind of get that, convert that sale a little bit later. The other important piece as well is that if you've got someone who's, maybe they've purchased a product from you 2 months ago or 3 months ago, but they haven't come back and bought a second product or a third product, and you want to get them back. So those are the re-engagement emails. And I'm pretty sure that everyone that's listening today has received one of these emails for an abandoned cart or a re-engagement email with a product that you've probably not purchased or thought about purchasing at some point in time. And then lastly, once you've kind of get the transactional campaigns, the promo campaigns, and the lifecycle emails down, additional work that you'd want to look at is to be doing a lot of testing. So whether that's you yourself or someone on staff, you want to look at doing testing. So, do you want to create segmentation? So if you've got a certain category of products and you've got a sale, do you only want to send your emails to to people who are only probably within a category segment, or do you want to send your emails to everyone? So those are things to consider. What does the subject line look like? So is the subject line giving a free shipping or a percentage off or a buy one get one? So those are things that you want to consider. You also want to think about the time of day. Is someone more likely going to be making a purchase during lunch hour or early in the morning or perhaps in the evening when they've got a little more downtime? So testing the time of day that you do email campaigns as well could be really important. So all things that you'll want to consider once the store is set up. The email part, getting this right can really help you with the revenue that you're going to make. If you take the time to create your store, you bring someone to the store and they get so close to want to purchase from you, getting the emails correct will help you make more money. So now that you've made the decision on the platform that you're going to use, you've went through the process of creating your store, and you've got really good product descriptions, you've got really good photography, your email marketing is top notch, and you're doing a really good job on getting your emails out there. the next thing that you want to do is now we want to bring more people to our store. And in an online world, there's a number of options that we can use to bring people to the store. So what we want to do there is that we want to be able to drive traffic to your site. So email marketing is one. We also want to make sure that anyone who's looking on Google for your potential products or services, people are finding you. Paid social, search engine optimization is super important. It's more of a long-term strategy, and then we'll also want to consider email, social media as being very is super important. Depending on your product or service, your social media may or may not be the number one tool that you use. If you can get all of these in place, then you should be set up for success. So again, with email marketing, what's important here is that you want to build your email list, right? So it's all the things that I talked about earlier were all about the people who have had a transaction with you, but you need to get more people into your list. So how do you do that? So those partnerships that we talked about will be super important. So cross promoting with a partner and getting other people to join your list that way is a good opportunity. Collaborations as well. So finding someone who maybe has a complementary partner or a complementary product and doing a collaboration, or an influencer is a good way to kind of add people to your list. The promotions that you do as well will be super important. New product launches. I think in many cases with new product launches, especially if you've got a second product, third product, fourth product, it's important that you get people. And you see this quite a bit when someone has a new product and it's like, get add your name to the waiting list for a pre-order, and then when the product becomes available, you're kind of the first in list to get the product. So that's definitely an opportunity for you to consider. And then also revisiting the abandoned cart email strategy. Probably the fastest way to generate business once you get your store off the ground is to look at doing ads on Google. So in many cases, and I'm sure most of us, even though over the course of today, for example, has probably already done this. If there's a product or service that we're looking for, naturally the first place that we go to look for that, if it's not Amazon, will probably be Google. So if you're only just getting your store set up, the chances of people finding you could be quite slim. So you want to make sure that you can stand out. And one way that you can stand out in the online space is to make sure that you're paying for Google Ads. A number of the pros here is that you only pay for traffic to your site. So if someone is looking for a red sweater or a green sweater or yellow sweater, for example, and then you want to show up for that because that's something that you have, then you're only going to pay for people to come to your site. Another pro is that if you're only servicing a certain market geographically, so if you're only servicing the Northern Peninsula or Newfoundland and Labrador, Atlantic Canada, or international, then the money that you spend in Google Ads, you can create it so only people within that geographic space will see your ads. So if you're only targeting the Northern Peninsula, for example, and someone is looking for a product that you may have in Australia, but you don't really need to do shipping to Australia, then they're not going to see your ads. Another pro is you can set your own budget. So unlike doing some advertising where there's a fixed cost that's involved, you're in charge of your budget. So if you only want to spend $5 a day or $10 a day, then you can do that. But if you want to spend $100 a day or $1,000 a day as your store grows, then you can do that as well. The other thing that's important is that you can create display ads or banner ads. So I'm sure many of you have seen these as you're scrolling through the Weather Network, or you're looking at, you're checking the latest updates on CBC or health updates. Getting display ads out in front of people to let people know about your product is a great opportunity that can be used in Google to be able to drive traffic to your site. And then also, as you're, especially if you have a Shopify store, the integration to be included in Google Shopping ads is quite easy. So what I mean by that is that if someone is shopping for, whether it's, again, the sweater example or a pair of boots or jewelry, then if you can be on the top of the Google search results, and it's going to show your product, the image of the product, the price of the product, and the name of the store. So it's a very good way to be able to create revenue for your online store, to be able to use that. And then lastly, using Google for remarketing. So we've all been there when we've, searched for a product on a certain website. So, whether it's Amazon or Sport Chek or the Gap or an online store of some sort, and then you went to the site, and then for the next 14 days, the only thing that you see are banner ads. No matter where you go, you're seeing banner ads for that same store that you were just shopping on online. So that's one of the big advantages of using Google to be able to buy ads. So people who have visited your site you will follow them around for 14 days or 28 days to get them to come back or to remind them about buying from you. The next piece would be paid social. So this would be buying ads on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn. So here you'd want to do that, for example. Let's say if you begin to do some social post and you notice that you've got a product that begins to do pretty well on Facebook or social media, spending money in that space can really amplify your reach. So that's just allowing you to be able to, for more people that you choose, in terms of, again, geographically, age groups, interest, would be able to see that, and allows you to get your product in front of more people from just doing traditional social media posts. It also increases your brand awareness, and the shopping experience has gotten much easier. So at the moment, if you're an Instagram user or a Facebook user, the ability to be able to add products to your post or to your stories, and for people to be able to go and purchase through social media is becoming easier and easier. So by doing the paid option through social networks, it allows you to probably reach people that maybe you traditionally can't reach. And again, lastly, with paid social, there's the remarketing component. So that is, when you visited a website or you've engaged with a social media brand, and then you're on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or TikTok, and as you're scrolling through your feed, you will see that brand show up again and again and again, and that's all done through remarketing with paid social. The next thing that you want to consider, and you begin these steps as you're building your store, is to look at search engine optimization. So this is really the opportunity to create traffic from Google and Bing. With probably the bulk of the work that you want to do here would be to the benefit from getting traffic from Google. And some of the things that you look at here would be the site structure. So how you create the structure for your products and the categories of your products, and how you label them, making sure that you write title tags and meta descriptions. So basically what those are is that when you do a search on Google, the title tag and the meta description, the title tag is the first blue line that typically comes up in a search result, and the meta description is a short, probably 1 to 2 sentences of what that page or product is about. So you want to make sure that you kind of get some of those things in place. And this is a very long-term strategy. It's something that you would invest in today, but you may not see the reward for this for 2, 3, 4, or 5 months down the road. So it's something that you should be continuously working on, but realizing that you may not see the benefits for quite some time. Other things you'll want to consider as well is getting more people to link to your website. So if we go back and we look at those partnership and collaboration opportunities, the more of those more people that you have linking back to your website, the further up the search engines you will go, and the more opportunity you will have for people to find for you, your site, and the products that you're selling. You'd also want to look at the Google My Business. This is it's just free for any business on Google. It allows you to put in, store hours, products, people who find you, connect with you, and message you as well. And then you can also encourage people to give you product reviews and service reviews, and getting the more of those you get on Google My Business, Facebook, and even Amazon, if that's an option that you wanted to look in to sell products on Amazon, the more reviews you get, the better it's going to be for you to generate more sales and more revenue. Lastly, you want to look at your social media strategy, and it's very important to think about the time and energy that you put into social media. For example, not every post that you're going to create on social is going to be a promotion. If you create the bulk of your social media posts to be sales and promotions, some people may not follow you, and that's all. So you want to make sure that you're telling the story of who you are, the story of your staff, where you're located, the benefits and the features of your product. So those are all things to consider, and the more of that you do, it helps you to build your brand awareness. But also it's an opportunity for people to provide you with customer feedback. So when we talk about all the considerations that were there earlier with regards to shipping, and if you create your own products, for example, it will allow you to get feedback from your customers, and then engaging with them and responding with them, and making updates to your products. All of these things will allow you then to create even more loyalty, and people who are familiar with you, and maybe purchasing a second time and a third time. And it is much easier to have someone who's already done business with you to do repeat business with you than it is to go and for someone to find someone who's new that hasn't done business with you in the past. So things you want to consider is, what platforms do you want to use for your store? Again, I want to go back here now to the roles and responsibilities in the early part of the presentation, where it's, who's going to do all of this work. And if you're a solopreneur, between creating your products and developing your products and managing your store, creating your store, and then having to take the time to do customer service. And you want to think about the social media channels that you have. It's also very important to think about all the who's going to be buying your product, and within that, there's probably the social networks. Some of them kind of lean towards certain demographics, and some of those could be gender-based, geographic-based, age-based. So depending on what it is that you're selling, you may begin to think, you may choose to only go with one social media source in the beginning, and then as you get more comfortable with it and build a following, maybe and the resources that you have, you begin to expand to a second or third. And sometimes, if you have the resources and time, by all means, please, I would encourage to kind of go and try each of them and see which one works and may not work for you. Things that you can potentially include on your social for promoting your store would be product features. And this could be things that you already know are good product features that you have, but if you use that customer feedback loop that we mentioned earlier, somebody may give you a product feature that maybe you're unaware of, and somebody else may want that. So highlighting those things would be important. Consumer reviews are good, because now people who are viewing your social media channels are seeing the reviews from people who have purchased from you. So it's not, the promotion or the encouragement that you're giving. It's people who've actually purchased your product and they're reviewing your product as well. Product launches. So as I mentioned before, if you're creating your own products, and you've got new products that are coming down the pipeline, then letting people be aware of when they're coming. Social media is a great place to kind of release that. Promotions, again, not being too an overly promotional on social, but there are certain promotions that you probably do want to include. Community support. I think one of the things that I've seen a lot, especially over the course of the pandemic and even before the pandemic, is the communities that we live in and the support that we all give each other seems to be very strong and encouraging. And I think, if anyone is going to be building a store and you kind of get your community around you, you can see a lot of that. And if you give back to the community again, the more you give, the more you get back from there. So I think it's important to make sure that you look at how you can encourage the community and support the community at the same time. And then also the culture that you have within your company. So whether it's a solopreneur or whether it's a small to mid-sized business, show the culture that you have and the things that you do on social. So in our space, all of the things that you would do is super important. But if you're not measuring them, you don't know what's working and what's not working. So when you have your store set up, it's going to be important that you, on a regular basis, look at the traffic that's coming into your store, look at who's buying from you, where they're coming from. Are they buying from you on a phone, whether they're buying from you on a desktop? So you want to make sure that you're looking at your analytics on a regular basis. You want to know if people are staying on your site. So it's one thing for people to find you, but if they find you online somehow and they come to your site and they only stay there for 10 seconds, you've put a lot of time and energy to get them there. Is there anything that you can do to get them to stay longer or to go and make that purchase? If you're running campaigns, which campaigns are working? Is it discounts with a certain percentage, or is it more of a buy one get one? Which of those types of campaigns are working? With regards to content that you're putting out there, if it's blog content, is that working? What's working? What's not working? Again, the abandoning cart, very important. Sometimes there could be tens of thousands of dollars that you may lose because what you've got in the way you've got your cart set up, that's not working. So making small improvements can have big gains. And then one thing you want to be looking at is, how do you consistently improve your site? One thing we always say about a website is that it's never really finished. So you will launch a store, and once that's done, you'll probably go and continuously make changes, sometimes small, sometimes big, but your site is rarely never finished. From there, you'll always want to make tweaks. And once you've done all that, you rinse and repeat. And you just kind of keep going through the whole process over and over again. You make adjustments, you learn from your community, you learn from what's happening on your site, and you kind of continue from there. So I've talked a lot right now, and I'd love to be able to, it's probably a lot of information to take in. There's a lot of people on the line, but I'd love to be able to, take any questions that's there. And we will send you a copy of this as well. So you'll have a copy to be able to kind of review yourself.